G'day everyone, Rune here. So, the Netflix Death Note. I have not seen this movie. However, I have seen videos of people going over the major story beats and how it differs from the original manga and anime. I was first exposed to this series in high school when I found one of the volumes in my school library. I picked it up, gave it a read, and was officially a goner. I now have all of the black editions of the manga and the 13th How to Read volume, the entire anime on DVD, and a fan recreation of Light's Death Note full of the names he was shown writing on screen. Now, like I said, I have not seen the Netflix version, and after hearing about it, I don't think I want to. The problem wasn't that it was different from the original source material. I have the movie version from 2006, and while I've only seen the first part, I did enjoy it. This is because the 2006 movie was trying to retell the original story in a new way, whereas a lot of people don't even know what Netflix was doing. For the 2006 movie, they put more focus on the mental state of Light Yagami towards the end, after spending the rest of the movie showing how scary he is as Kira. At the end of the movie, he causes the death of a girl, Shiori, who had been in love with him, in order to get involved in the investigation under the excuse of seeking justice for Shiori's death. The very last scene is of Ryu commenting on Light's actions and asking if he had loved her, to which Light can only reply with, "I don't know." This is a small but very impactful insight into the mind of someone like Light Yagami, who has some very strong psychopathic traits. It also humanizes him in the wake of what he's just done by making the audience realize that he actually doesn't even fully understand his own emotions. It makes you shift gears from hating his guts to pitying him. In my case, the immediate thought that popped into my head was, am I seriously empathizing with the manipulative murderer? Now, let's look at the Netflix version. The Light in this is not Light Yagami, I just want to get that out there. Light Turner, the main character of the Netflix movie, may share a given name with the original main character, but their personalities are completely different. Now, taking concepts presented in the original source material and exploring it with new characters is not a bad thing. In fact, I would very much like to see it happen more. But only as long as you don't try to pass off that new character as the old one, which is what they did here. Light Turner is not Light Yagami, and they should never have tried to make him so. Netflix was basically trying to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to give their own take on the Death Note idea with their own characters, but also have the original characters in their respective roles in order to get the fans of the original to watch. They were trying to make two very different movies at once, basically. What I'm going to do here is give my version of a series based on the original Death Note. I am not going to be giving an adaptation that follows the manga/anime as that has been done many a time. Instead, I want to do what I mentioned before, explore the ideas and concepts of Death Note with different characters and situations. First, because it gives me more to talk about other than just saying copy what's already there, and second, because I think this is going to be more fun. First off, I need to decide on where this story is going to take place. The original Death Note took place in Japan, and we see all throughout the series how that location affects events and the personalities and perceptions of the characters. For example, it's referenced several times that it's illegal for citizens to carry firearms. This has an impact on how the arrest of Hikachi plays out in the anime and manga, and the death of Shiori in the 2006 movie. In the Netflix version, it takes place in Seattle, Washington, and has no impact on the story or characters. Let's fix that. I did a little research on the Seattle area and found out that it tends to have very dry summers and very wet winters. It is also well known for its performing arts, jazz is considered the home of grunge, and annually participates in the National Poetry Slam. I didn't even know that was a thing. There's also a 24-day film festival. Okay, performing arts is a big deal here, from what I can see as a person that doesn't even live in America. Now that I have a general idea of the climate and culture of the area, I can start to think of how it can play into the story and give a name to this Death Note inspired story. Let's call it Death Note Death Song. It acts as a reference to Seattle's art culture and will also let the audience know right off the bat that this isn't going to be a retelling of the books. First off, I need to decide on where this story is going to take place. The original Death Note took place in Japan, and we see all throughout the series how that location affects events and the personalities and perceptions of the characters. For example, it's referenced several times that it's illegal for citizens to carry firearms. This has an impact on how the arrest of Hikachu plays out in the anime and manga, and the death of Shiori in the 2006 movie. In the Netflix version, it takes place in Seattle, Washington, and has no impact on the story or characters. Let's fix that. I did a little research on the Seattle area and found out that it tends to have very dry summers and very wet winters. It is also well known for its performing arts, jazz is considered the home of grunge, and annually participates in the National Poetry Slam. I didn't even know that was a thing. There's also a 24-day film festival. Okay, performing arts is a big deal here, from what I can see as a person that doesn't even live in America. Now that I have a general idea of the climate and culture of the area, I can start to think of how it can play into the story and give a name to this Death Note-inspired story. Let's call it Death Note Death Song. It acts as a reference to Seattle's art culture and will also let the audience know right off the bat that this isn't going to be a retelling of the books. Now that we've established the location, I need to establish who the main character is. Now, while this is not going to be like Yagami, that doesn't mean this new character can't have some similarities to him. Heck, they can have allusions to several characters as long as they are their own character by the end of the day. Now, here's what I have. This main character is in high school, is a straight-A student, and has a goal of becoming a police officer. They play the guitar and are involved in the school's music program. However, they are very isolated from others in their age group because everyone just sees them as the weird genius kid. Notice how I didn't mention a gender or name for our main character. Well, that's because this character description could apply to any gender, and I wanted to establish the character concept before talking about this next part. You see, I actually have 4 names I could go with for this person. 2 for a boy and 2 for a girl. The reason this happened is because I wanted to make the character's name an homage to Light Yagami, but then I remembered an observation with the Netflix version about how the roles of Light and the film's version of Misa Amane had been switched. It gave me the idea of giving this new character a name that paid homage to both of the original Kiras to further establish that they're in the role of the main character but are not Light. For the boy, I came up with the names Ray Yates and Neil Anderson, and for the girl, I thought of the names Eileen Yates and Luna Anderson. The last names are simple. Yagami starts with a Y, Amane starts with an A. The first names are the ones I put more thought into, as these reference Light's name in 2 different ways. The first options of Ray and Eileen reference the English translation of his name, Ray of Light, and Eileen meaning Light Bringer. The second options are references to how the name is written in Japanese, as it's referenced many times. For those that don't know or have simply forgotten, Light's name is written for the kanji for moon, so the name Luna was just too perfect. But oh my god, there are so few names for boys that mean moon. It was either calling him Neil after Neil Armstrong or Artemis after the Greek goddess of the moon. If any of you have better suggestions, I'd really appreciate it. Personally, I'm going with Luna Anderson, as that's the name I like most. I'm not going to use Ryuk. As much as I love the guy and as funny as he is, I'm not going to stick him in this story. The reason he dropped his death note in the original was because he was bored. Would it still work? Yes. Would it make the story too much like the original because the guy's such a presence? Also yes. For this Shinigami, I've decided to take an idea from Story Surgery and create a Shinigami based on the Washington Native American communities. And while doing research, I discovered that Seattle is actually named after Sial, a chief of the Squamish and Duwamish people. So take a guess at what tribes I decided to pay homage to with this. For this new death god, I've decided to make him look like a raven, after the Squamish deity, the Raven. The Raven is a culture hero of the Squamish, and while a benevolent figure that helps others, is also a trickster who gets himself into trouble a lot. I also want him to be carrying a drum because looking up anything about the Duwamish was really hard. One of the only things I could find was an interesting little tidbit about how the Duwamish don't have a word for love in their native language. Instead, love is meant to be expressed through kind thoughts, thoughtful gestures, and through things like song. And the Raven is canonically married. Another idea that Story Surgery brought up was the idea of the Shinigami not speaking the same language as the main character. And that got me thinking, why are Ryuk and at least Rem and Sita all fluent in Japanese and English? Ryuk outright states that the reason he wrote the Death Note rules in English is because it's the most commonly spoken language in the modern day. They all know that human language has changed and that there are many of them. And yes, I know they are all basically immortal, but they don't pay attention to the human world unless they need to kill someone or an event like Light Yagami happens. They see people's names above their head, and Ryuk states that this line of number vomit is Light's lifespan in Shinigami. So clearly they have their own language. They don't need to speak any human language because they could just copy down the name without needing to know what it says. That's not needed. Yet at least 3 of them have at least 2 human languages under their belt. Why is that? Well, maybe like how they can see a person's name and lifespan, they can also translate their own language into whatever language the human they are currently talking to is most fluent in. Or maybe, like how only those that own or have touched a Death Note can see the Shinigami that owns that note, the Death Note also allows the wielder or people who have touched it to understand the Shinigami. The Shinigami isn't speaking any human language, it just sounds like it to those that have touched the Death Note. It makes sense, and just because the Shinigami can talk to you doesn't mean they will. I mean, this character is already based on a trickster deity. So here's my idea. This Shinigami dropped their notebook by accident, but when they went to get it, Luna had already picked it up. Being more than a little annoyed by this, he refuses to say anything to her, or at least anything she can understand. He only ever speaks in either some made-up language that could be Shinigami, or in what Luna discovers is Lushutseed. The Shinigami isn't speaking to her in a language she can understand, not because he can't, but because he's holding a grudge over her picking up his Death Note. It'd make for a fun bit of misdirection and one funny reveal later. Especially if the only reason Luna never gave back the Death Note was because she didn't think that was an option because he never told her. It'd also be interesting to see someone struggling to learn an entirely new language without having any of the books or references. Needing to learn it bit by bit, word by word, until she could speak it. Maybe not fluently, but enough to understand and be understood. This could make her the first human to learn the Shinigami language. Before I can begin to tell a story with the characters and concepts I already have, I need to establish what themes I want the story and the characters to explore. The themes of the original Death Note all revolve around one key concept, that being justice. What is justice? Who has the right to determine what it is? Do the ends justify the means? There are also elements of the tropes he who fights monsters and power corrupts, and the ever-lingering question to the audience of if they would use a Death Note if they got their hands on one. In the original Death Note, these themes are explored best with L and Light. 2 people with very similar personalities, but very different and very stubborn views on what justice is. Light views justice through his own lens, while L views justice as something that exists under a specific rule set. But both of them are still willing to bend their own morals in order to reach their end goal. The difference being that we saw Light bend his to the point of breaking, while L died before he reached that point. Now, for this story, what if our main character didn't actually have a solid grip on what they thought justice was? I mean, she is a teenager, she's still figuring herself out. With Luna not having a solid grasp on what she thinks justice is, she can act as the middle ground between the two extremes, and also point out the fallacies and hypocrisies of those around her. It would also make for a good character arc of her figuring out her own sense of justice and what she truly believes. Now we come to the final part of this video, the narrative in which all these parts come together. First off, this is just going to be a simple outline of the story and some of the major plot beats. I'm not going to be giving a detailed plot because depending on if this was a TV series, a movie, or a movie series, the pacing and final points would all be very different. For example, if this were just one movie, there would be a lot less time to develop the characters and themes, and things would need to be a lot more fast-paced. If this were a movie series, there would be more time, but the plot points would need to be structured around the number of movies, and there would still be limited time. And for a TV series, there would be more time to flesh everything out, but there would also be multiple writers working on different episodes, and the ever-looming threat of the show getting cancelled and needing to rush the ending. I will, however, give a detailed outline of the opening moments, as this would be the most important part of establishing our main character and the Death Note world. Ahem! Luna is sitting in her school's after-school music club, trying to focus on the task that the teacher in charge had given them. While it's meant to be a group task, the other students either decided not to team up with her or have left her to do all the work alone. We learn, through the whispered conversations that Luna is overhearing, that everyone thinks she could easily do this task on her own and that she doesn't need a group. We even hear that some of the other students are a little weirded out by how smart she is. The club eventually ends and she begins to make her way to the library in order to do some studying for an upcoming test. On the way, she comes across a little black notebook with strange white markings on it. Thinking that someone must have dropped it, she opens it up to try and find a name or address, only to find a whole bunch of names written on the pages. Next to some of the names are little comments like burnt or fall. She's about to flick to the back to see if she can find anything there when she hears a drum. Turning to look, she sees a tall individual in a costume and wearing some kind of bird mask. She's about to ask the stranger if the book is theirs when she's distracted by something. When she turns back, the figure is gone. Confused and a little freaked out, Luna continues on her way, eventually getting to the library. While she does get the books that she had been going there for in the first place, her mind keeps wandering to the book, making studying impossible. Finally, she gives into her curiosity, pulls the book out, and begins to look up the names in it on her laptop. To her shock, she finds that the names in the book are all people that have died. The sound of a drum drifts through the library, and she's approached by the figure she'd seen before. As the figure approaches, she's shocked to find that what she had thought was a mask is actually the creature's face. She looks around, but no one else seems to notice the strange creature. It comes right up to her and says something in a language she doesn't understand. When she tells it that she can't understand what it's saying, it points to the book, to the search results on her laptop, then to itself. Luna takes a deep breath and asks if it's the one that wrote the names inside the book, to which it nods. A cold feeling begins to settle in her stomach and she nervously asks if the people are dead because their names are in the notebook. Before the creature can answer, a voice calls out over the PA system that the library is closing. Quickly rushing to get her things, she borrows out the books that she didn't get to use and rushes home. Once she gets there, we see that Luna has a pretty happy and normal home life with a mother, father, and 1 or 2 siblings. We only get a hint that things aren't as idyllic as they appear when Luna lies to her parents at dinner, telling them about how she'd had so much fun at her music club working on a new song with her friends. After dinner, Luna goes up to her room and places the Death Note on her desk, proceeding to stare at it. This opening sequence does a few things. It establishes Luna as someone with a high intelligence, or at least someone that is a fast worker, as she's able to do the work of several people on her own. It also establishes her as someone that is very isolated from others her own age, and that she is reluctant to talk about these things with her own family. It also establishes that the Shinigami won't be speaking in a language that she can understand. From there, the story would become a suspenseful mystery. Luna finds out through odd occurrences on the news and what little she can piece together from Raven that there are 2 death notes and someone is using it to kill criminals. She sympathizes with the intention but objects to the method, as there's always that question of innocence. It always bothered me that in the original, the fact that innocent people can still go to jail never gets addressed. Yes, Light kills innocent people knowingly, but whenever it comes to people that are in jail, he never questions if they are innocent people paying for a crime they didn't commit. Here, Luna brings that part of the dilemma to the table as, again, she is meant to act as the middle ground, pointing out the holes in the logic of both sides. Luna's involvement in the mystery for the first part will be that of a mysterious helper from the shadows. As she's the only one that knows the Death Note is a thing and has a goal of becoming a cop, she feels like she has a responsibility to do what she can to stop Kira. Luna's father, like Light Yagami's, will be a police officer, allowing Luna to see how the Kira investigation is going and where they may need a little helpful nudge. Technically, she could hand over the Death Note, but that runs the extremely high risk of making her look either A, crazy, or B, guilty. So this part of the story would be split between Luna's POV and the POV of the task force, with Luna doing her own investigations from the shadows, then pulling a Misa and covertly passing those findings onto the police while keeping her own identity hidden. Meanwhile, the task force is not only trying to find Kira, but also this mysterious informant that seems to know way more than they should. Eventually, Elle puzzles out that Luna is their informant, but lacks the hard evidence to prove it. So rather than try to go through the tedium of an interrogation to try and find out why and how she's doing this, he decides to cut right to the chase and just offer her to join the task force straight up. And just like with Kira's actions, Luna also fills the same role for Elle, even though they're on the same side, pointing out how many of the actions he takes are against the law and sometimes just downright unethical. Seeing the flaws and hypocrisies of both sides would cause her to question her own morals and where she draws her own lines. Eventually, they would stop Kira, but maybe the process would also cost Elle his life, leaving Luna as the only one of the 3 left. Or maybe Luna and Elle simply part ways, acknowledging that while they understand each other's points of view, Luna can never agree with Elle's methods, and Elle can't help but feel that Luna is just naive. I really like the idea of Luna ending the story by opening up a rehabilitation center, putting her money where her mouth is that punishment isn't the only answer and not everyone in jail is guilty. And that, everyone, is all I've got for now. What do you think of this very, very rough draft idea of a Death Note spin-off story? I'm Rune, see you in the next story.